मुझे लिंक देना ना था सेम सेम लिंक है Good evening to one and all. Today I am going to talk about concept and development of human right, which is in semester 1, group 4. So, before going to detail, we should start of history of human rights. So, for century past, that women all over the world have not only been denied full justice, social, economic and political, but as a weaker sex. They have been used, abused, exploited and then discarded to lead immoral, extravagant and destitute life till their death. Although they constitute about half the total population and have contributed and sacrificed not less than men in the national freedom struggle. At any point of time, but they have been deprived of their due shares in various areas of activities and have been subjected to inhuman and humiliating wrongs from birth to the death of no sin. So when we start to focus of history of human rights, we have to go in two different aspects, or we can say two different types. One is history of a concept and the second is history of a practices. So the general thought, unfortunate impression has ever since been that women are subhuman species, an object of contempt and ridicule, a commodity of better and expendable assets and a plaything for mere sexual enjoyments. The Asian Judo-Christian society regarded women as a scorpion, every ready to sting, and pagan which Arab saw in her devil vibes. So the India regarded women as a social evil to a burn to parents of her husband, and nowadays, however, women have broken in their ill societies or their ill social circles and are ready to face the contemporary challenges without any help and hesitations. And consequently, like March 8 is formally observed that celebrated in several countries including India as a mark of integrated achievements towards the equality of rights, status and dignity of women and their equal participations in economic, social and cultural development in contemporary social world scenario. So the women constitute about one half of the global population, but they are placed at various disadvantageous positions due to gender difference and bias. So they have been the victims of violence and exploitations by the male dominated society all over the world. Ours is a tradition born society where women have been socially, economically, physically, psychologically and sexually exploited from time immemorial, sometimes in the name of religion, sometimes on the predicts of writing in the scriptures, and sometime by the social sanctions. So the concept of equality between male and female was almost unknown to us. And before the enactment of the Constitution of India, of course, the preamble of the Constitution, which is the supreme law of the land, which seeks to secure to its citizen, including women, folks, justice, social, economic, political liberty of thought, expressions, belief, faith, worship, equality of status, etc. So the history is a mute witnesses to the most inhuman suffering that man has inflicted of a man. And a man's right to the liberty is the most scared rights for him, and therefore it should not be restrained without the sanction of law. So, a fruitful and meaningful life presupposes full of dignity, honors, health, and welfare. In the modern philosophy, the treatment of a human being which offered human dignity and imposes avoidable torture and reduce the man to the level of beast would certainly be arbitrary and is impossible as a code of human conduct in all religions. So, the even the Justice P.N. Bhagwati, the Supreme Court of India, state this seminar on human rights. In that seminar of human rights, which is organized in ILA, Allahabad, we submitted in the mention that on religion's foundation, right to vote, right to trade, right to access to justice, their citizen, etc., was given in that. It is a state of grace, and it was started the period of 15 June 1215, that their privilege will not be encroached and hampered. So when history of human right is there, in this two concept, like one is concept today which identifies human rights, and the second is concept identified at the time as human rights. You can see here below the first heading that concept today identifies human right whether or not originally described as right. So whether it is originally described, whether it is a written form, whether it is a not written form, but it is a concept that identify, yes, these are human rights, these are the concept of human rights. And the second say concept identify at the times as being as human rights. So the first point is here whether it is a identify and whether it is a not identify, whether it is a not originally described, but still it is a concept of human rights. And the second is whether it is a completely identified, that portion is identified and say it is a concept of human right. When we go in B point, like history of practices, so again there is a practices for two, one is for positive and another is for negative one. See, the positive practice where the human rights are promotion. Promotion means like me, I am following my next generation following the next generation is following, that is for the promote, it's going to be a promotion, the positive practices, positive practice to promote that concept, that practices. Where is the negative, that everyone say no, this is a violation, this is somewhere is going to be infringed, either my rights or either somewhere others right. So the negative practices, human rights violations is there. So there is a two concepts. Then which points are included in human rights? So education, assembly, thought, press, information, speech, religions, movement, association, these all points, 9 points, which are included in the definition of human rights, as well as these all are included in freedom of speech and expression too, in Article 19 of Indian Constitution. Article 19 is the fundamental rights to every citizen, and this human rights is a wider concept. Now, as I earlier discussed, positive and the negative one. So these are the rights, like right to life, born free, equal pay for equal work, protection against discrimination, equal access, freedom of thought, equal before the law, liberty and security. If these are our rights, and of course if these are rights are violation, that will become a negative concept of human rights. Now when we start for the deep root of human right, so it was the period where that some of the rights list in recognized by French, and these rights are natural rights. Natural rights become natural rights, but see, these natural rights, not everyone is going to be accepted, and not everyone is happily for these rights. And of course, whenever the new rights or the new law came before us, so somewhere we are accepted as a positive, somewhere it's not, somewhere it is opposed. The same applicable here only, natural law. And in this French period, new person enter, and that is for the Napoleon 1800, the French Napoleon 1800. And Napoleon mentioned that these are some of the point which has to be included in this right. Like everyone was not happy with these rights. As earlier discussed, Napoleon decided to overthrow the new French democracy, like call himself emperor of the world. Why? Because enter in international agreement, and he provides right across the world. That right only in Europe and rest of the world did not qualify, because these rights accepted in Europe very easily, but the rest of the world they are not, or they didn't. So the young lawyer from India, they demanded for equality on the basis of color and race, and because of that reason, development of protection of right started in the 19th century. So the Henry Dennett established a Red Cross Society for the protection of human rights in the wider concept in 1863. Where Russian Revolution, the 1970, many peoples which presented Napoleon's second autocracy, and establishment of International Labour Organization in the year 1912, which facing a Second World War, and which faced the two world wars, with how population affected their rights, and which destroyed by Hitler. So here near about 1.5 million, which I mentioned, which killed is Holocaust, and after they realized to protect world by war, and then United Nations formed for the protection of human rights in 1945. The reason is here, in Second World War 1.5 million people were killed, And if third world war will affected during the this because of that reason of human rights, it won't be happen. That is the reason United Nations formed in 1945 for the French concept, followed by the French concept of natural rights, and finally became the human rights. So some people accepted, some were denial, obviously. So not easily agree to accept that once everyone accepts so-called as a basic right as a human rights, but it's gradually, and it wouldn't take a lot of time to accept the concept of human right. According to United Nations, when they formed in 1945, they established few rights which is important regarding the human rights, like we all are free and equal, right to life, no torture, we have right no matter where are you go, the right to trial, and no one can take away from human rights, do not discrimination, no slavery, we all are equal before the law, etc., etc. Freedom of expression too. And after that, there are so many regional conventions which set up for the protection on human rights, like European Convention on Human Rights 1950, American Convention on Human Rights 1978, African Charter on Human Rights 1988, Asian Human Rights, Arab Leagues. CEDAW is also play a very important role for the human rights. It's not for the only human rights, it's a human right, and of course a discrimination against women. So CEDAW is a form of United Nations Convention on the elimination of all form of discrimination against women. International Women's Rights, which treaty was adopted in 1949. So if a woman wants to protect her right, she has Constitution of India as well as protection of human rights, the concept of human right, as well as CEDAW, because it is a United Nations Convention. There is also a civil and political rights. These are civil and political rights, like right to vote, freedom from arrest and freedom from arbitrary arrest and detention, right to life and integrity of person, equality before law, equal protection of law. When you read these all civil and political rights, you will came to know that these rights are very much similar to our Indian Constitution articles. But that is Indian Constitution article. But this is international covenant. First is simply civil and political rights, and after some time it become international covenant of civil and political rights. There is also a protocol, also international protocol of civil and political rights. That freedom of discrimination, race, religion, origin, fortune, birth, other status, language, sex, participation in government, freedom to seek and obtain asylum, these all are civil and political rights. Economic, social and cultural rights. See, when we say economic, social and cultural, it is very easy to understand that economics means where we earn something like property, something like public services. So it is easy to understand economic. Social, society affect, and cultural right that we are enjoying. So it is simply to understand the economic, social and cultural rights, and news rights not covered here by other human rights agreement, like to property, equal access to public service, equal access to public property and services. But human rights challenges is also one of the difficulties, because even it is a definition is very good, but this a wider concept, like a global aspect is there. So their challenges is like poverty and global inequality, discrimination, armed force, conflict and violence, democracy. These are some conflict in human rights. But despite this, as the world's biggest sovereign, secular and democratic republic, India's human rights are hampered by the country's enormous size and population, widespread poverty, lack of education and various cultures. So Indian Constitution, which guarantees fundamental liberties including religious freedom. So when we say current discourses and political, economic and human rights concern, like these are some data which is I collected for how it's going to be affected in political scenario as far the human rights is concerned. So we are not going in much detail in that point. World Inequality Database, this is also one of the factor when human rights concept is going to be affected. Like here the new estimate that total 173 nations which cover, and the global inequality is also more extended each period of time, and that each country which income estimate for the entire distribution from the poorest 1% to the richest 0.001%. So that is the different point of view. We are going for global income equality, and this is the general overview of inequality worldwide. So basically when we say general overview of inequality worldwide here, it was the golden rays of sun enlightening the world of 19th century, where humans being to know about human rights and they possess. So the worth of human personality which began to realize that the resultant of human rights movement was experienced by human being after the World War II, and during the war whole humanism was shocked due to heinous crimes committed against humanities, and human right perish. So history silently witnesses tyranny and complete lawlessness of Nazi leader of Germany. So the human values and dignities and moral were barbarously negated. So right to the people became their need of our to the established for international peace and security, where in 1941, in this 1941, that President Franklin, which reflected in the proclamation of four freedom is more important, and he mentioned in 1941 that one is freedom of speech, freedom of religions, freedom from want, freedom from fear, and the declaration of president which carry weight by, he said, freedoms mean the supremacy of human rights. That everywhere our support goes to those who struggle to gain those rights to keep them. And the growth and evolution of human rights and international law have achieved a remarkable progress since the year 1945 when United Nations established, and several charters, several treaties, etc., which came into existence for effective enforcement of human rights. So for Universal Declaration of Human Rights, basically in the Latin verse there are some the middle is stand which uh, so the Latin America and the Middle East stand as the world's most unequal region, with the top 10% of the income distributions, which capturing respectively 54% and 56% of the average national income. So in Latin America, which amidst the decline of inequality, which is the level in the handful of country which inequality persisted and even increases in some others. In the Middle East, like Gulf country, have been marked extreme inequality levels with little variation since the 1990s. So these are some data where we know that how even the human rights concept is there, even the American population and the public investment, Europe, the global inequality data also is show that rising inequality is not a fatality, and that countries with strong investment in public services and welfare policies have the lowest inequality levels. So tackling inequality is a matter of political choices. Russia is also there. So we cannot say that India is only affected the concept of human rights, or like the development is fully established here only. Across the world, in the global aspect also, there are few points where a few data where, like in Russia is also in the income there, I which I going to show you, the lack of financial transparency, taxation, so they are affected. Because when we say human rights, so human rights is not only look out the matter of equality, the not only the matter of education, not only the matter of nationality. Human rights accepted all the important points, all the nine points: freedom, equality, all this, that, everything. So if any country, any one single point affect, like for economic is going to be affected, connectivity, all points going to be affected, even the health, the education, the services, all points are going to be affected. Sorry. So these are some data. Yeah, discrimination, of course, the in international laws also, even we have national international laws, and the treaty, the agreements, and the convention, so many things, but still there are discriminations that these laws um, never fulfill that point. Like for international human rights law, the states are expected to eliminate direct and indirect discrimination in laws and practices on the ground of race, color, sex, etc., or other opinion, that national and social origin, the property, birth, physical, mental, these all are including the point that going to be affected in discrimination. Then what does the Human Rights Act say about discrimination? The Human Rights Acts make it illegal to discriminate on the wide range of grounds, including race, sex, color, language, political, other opinion, etc., national, minority, property, birth, and other status. As the human right concept, and if we say yes, it is a development, a complete development of human right, but still there are big, like the country, and you can see like the Spain and Greece, Italy, France, Australia, these are all are the country, still they are going to be agree that yes, the percentage of people who agree strongly, that disagree, like immigrant are human rights, human beings, it is our moral duty to help them, and those who neither agree nor disagree with this statement are also included. So the below these are the disagree points, and the dark color is say for the agree points of these human rights. So these are some see, these are overall the global aspect, because if we say human rights concept, we are not just focused on the human rights in India, we have to go for the all over different countries, then why they are going to be affected. So these are the number of points where, like, if France is 5%, 5% only it's going to be affected, you can see here, and the most is for the Turkey. Turkey is the country where 43% is going to affect it because of the human rights. So every country is somewhere affected, like 2%, 3%, 4 and 5%. So what is the human rights definition, which is basic concept of this? So human right, which represent demands of individual and group for the sharing of powers, health and other values, and respect, reciprocal tolerance and mutual forbearance are fundamental to human rights. So the human rights limits state power, states through the rule of law, protect the rights of individual but do not convey or endow the rights of individual. What are the rights which are most important for the human rights? So rights are reasonable claim of persons. These claims are protected by law, and all of us that would like to live of course happily without being made to feel inferior. So similarly we have the responsibility to allow others to enjoy their right as well. So your rights come with the responsibility to the protect and the respect the rights of the other person as well. So these are some rights, the basic things in human rights. So the human rights, and you can see this chart that human rights is there. Above is for the human rights violation resulting in ill health, whereas the left side is for the reducing vulnerability of ill health through human rights, and the right one promotion of violation of human rights through health development. If we consider only for the health point of view, so there are different things. I only consider here for the health. So the ill health is the first one, that the violation resulting in ill health, that is for the torture, slavery, violence against women, harmful traditional practices. So as per our second or third slide, we discuss for the positive and the negative practices, and the negative is a violation. This point is come over there, the harmful traditional practices. This is completely a negative concept because it's violation. We are not happy if it is there. Reducing vulnerability of ill health through human rights. So it is a positive one. Right to information, right to education, right to food and nutrition, right to water. It is a positive concept. It's going to be a develop, It's going to be a promotion one. So it is a positive practice. And the next is promotion of violation of human rights through health development. Of course it is a positive also. Right to participation, freedom from discrimination, freedom of movement, freedom of privacy. The positive concept, positive practice. So the international humanitarian law and international human rights law, what is the difference exactly? Because the concept of human right is somewhere it is what we can say, it is like misunderstood that yes, this is the concept of human rights as per the Protection of Human Rights Act in India, and somewhere it is the same in international. No, it's slightly we can say it's a different, because humanitarian law is applicable only in context of armed conflict, whereas human rights law is always applicable. Whereas here based on distinction between civilian and combatants, where here provided protection of every human beings regardless of his or her status, where humanitarian law is less important because it is a territorial link of person, and here for the human rights it is essentially a territorial, and for the humanitarian law it's a lex specialist, and here for the nothing. So the two area of international law as per the human rights is concerned is very important. That is one, agreement between states on how to conduct war and on protection of individuals, civilian and combatants. Whereas international rights law say agreement between states regulating the relationship between each states and the individual over which it has jurisdiction. Human rights says that fundamental rights to which a person is inherently entitled because he or she belongs to that being a human being. Whereas cornerstones of public policy, continuous philosophical debates over what is meant by rights. So if there is question like what is meant by rights, so again we have to go for the our Indian Constitution. Which rights are there? Which rights you are there? Equality is also there, 14. Everyone is equal before the law. But then which rights are going to be affected? Then you go for the Article 15, because it's safe for the discrimination. if your rights is infringed or your rights is going to be affected, so of course there is a discrimination, of course there will be the violation will be there. Started during the Protestant Reformation and continuing to the Bill of Rights and United States Constitution. So the definition of human rights and human rights definition, see the which is I mentioned here for the different words, like it is easy to understand each one of you that human rights are universal legal guarantee. It's a universal. Main important point here for the protection of individuals, a single individuals and groups of the people in the worldwide, in the global areas. Actions against actions and omission that interfere with fundamental freedoms, entitlement and human dignity. Human rights law oblige governments and other duty bearers to do certain things and prevent them for doing others. So human rights definitions are those freedom, powers, institution or claim related to the primary or basic goods, including any person for the simple fact of being human, and to guarantee a decent life, are independent of individual factors such as status, gender, sexual orientation, ethnicity or nationality, and are independent or not depend entirely on existing law. So the human rights as an Indian context say human rights mean the right relating to life, liberty, equality and dignity of the individuals guaranteed by the Constitution or embodied in the international covenant and enforceable by the court in India. So when international covenant is there, so you please go through for the UDHR, ICCPR, ICECR. Without read of UDHR, Universal Declaration of UDHR, this point never complete. A very deep study is required for the completion of this topic for the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And not only for the UDHR, ICCPR, ICESR, and of course apart from this there are so many covenant which is play a very important role for the the concept or for the development of this human right. We have to go through for that also, because it's a treaty, it's agreement, so we cannot be ignore that point. Human rights in India, the situation is a very complex one, because as a result of this country large size and the population wise and its a tremendous diversity, its status as a developing country and its history as a former colonial territory, it is often held that particularly by Indian human rights group and activists that numbers of the Dalit and untouchable caste has suffered or and continue to suffer substantial discrimination. So although human rights problem too exist in India, even though we have so many the all of the hand of this international covenant and the treaties, but the country is generally not regarded as a human right concern unlike other countries in South Asia. So human rights in Indian Constitution what say that every human rights has rights, that we have so many rights in Article 19, Article 14, 15, 16, 17. These are the fundamental rights. Basic concept of human rights as per the Indian perspective, that fundamental and basic right is important, collectively and individual rights, first, second and third generation rights, and of course the classical rights is important for the basic of human right. Whereas fundamental rights attached to this basic of human right, basic concept of human rights, so right to equality, because if there is no equality, again it will create a violation, again it will create some disturbance, that means it is affected your right, affected your rights means it is affected your human rights. So right to equality is fundamental rights. right to constitutional remedy. It's affected, then you have a remedy to go either High Court or for the Supreme Court. Right to freedom of religion, right to freedom, rights against exploitation, and cultural and education rights. So these are the rights which connectively to basic concept of human rights. National Human Rights Commission and the State Human Rights Commission. These two commission nowadays, every state has state level State Human Rights Commission, and for the national level National Human Rights Commission. These are some simply the people, the member who were entertaining the cases, where the people who were who are in Chief Justice of a High Court, judges of Supreme Court of India, then chairperson of the following National Commission, then National Commission of Scheduled Tribes. These are the some one people must be there for the every commission, like Scheduled Caste, Scheduled Tribe, the women's one of the minority, and of course the chairperson. So everywhere the State Human Rights Commission as well as the national level both. As for the Indian Constitution say right to equality is important, protection of discrimination which I mentioned earlier, equality of opportunity in matter of public employment, abolition of untouchability, and abolition of title. Apart from this, there are so many points which I couldn't mention over here, that regarding for the if the violation is there somewhere, is directly or indirectly come in the point of it is human rights, it's affected to your human rights. But these are the main point which I mentioned here, 5. So definition which has been given by the Protection of Human Rights Act, section 2D, which says that human rights means the rights relating to life, liberty, equality and dignity of the individual, which guaranteed by the Constitution and embodied in the international covenant and enforceable by courts in India. UDHR 1948 says all human beings are born free and equal in rights and dignity. So then what are human rights? So all these points are human rights. These rights are somewhere interrelated, interdependent and indivisible. And these rights are inherent to all human beings, regardless of what point, like sex, nationality, language, any. So these rights, including the right to life and liberty, that the right to work, and there are many more. So everyone is entitled to these rights without discrimination. So this is Indian Constitution, which also say India was a signatory to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and there are number of fundamental guarantee has been given by the Indian Constitution that has to be followed. Fundamental right also there, human rights are universal point of view, and people are entitled to enjoy human rights without any condition. Human rights has been adopted as a United Nations Charter, international level as a human right concept. So International Court of Justice is also is there for investigation the matter regarding of human rights violation. So there are so many like the matter which is go before the International Court of Justice, and every time Geneva human rights are enriching in the Geneva Convention of Human Rights. So these are the points where like right to political, economic and human rights is concerned. So these are the points, and nowadays that everyone know that human right we celebrated in 10th December. So this is not in go for that one, but of course human right is main point where right to freedom for the occupation, it is 7 to 9 points which is interconnected to each other, which I mentioned. If there is only one, the freedom, right to freedom of occupation. So if there is occupation, means there will be definitely competition will come, and if there will be competition and you are eligible for that and you won't be then again you create then again it will affect your equality. So right to equality again there, right to life and personal liberty. So these points which are connected to, like connected to every points. So we cannot say it is like only right to freedom of occupation is affected and we don't want this all points. So obviously it is interconnected. So we have to be like, it's directly and indirectly come in that point like freedom of occupation. So if the concept of human right, if we say, we can just only focus but what is the beginning of human right is there, like for the Napoleon, like for the but before that going, we should also understood that point of Magna Carta, because Magna Carta is the one who mentioned the all the points which is like for the these are the point of important for this development of the every country. Even though regardless there are some changes, like the country who are the other country has accepted, some of the country has not accepted, but still even in the fundamental right also there are some points which are which were available in Magna Carta and that the borrow and we add over here. So like these are the right which entitle that mankind a decent civilized life in which the inherent dignity of each human beings will receive respect and protection. So the idea of human rights does not imply merely the comfort and convenience that science and technology can provide, nor does it imply mankind rise to the fulfillment of free or their biological needs. So it rather means those conditions of life which allow mankind to develop and use their human qualities of intelligence and conscience and to satisfy their spiritual needs. Human rights are fundamental to our nature, and in the absence of these rights we cannot live. We cannot live as human beings. So to deny human right is to set the stage of political and social unrest, that wars, hostility between nations and between groups within our nations, and lead to urgent demands for a better life with larger freedom. Now there are of course that the two kind has created like civil and political rights and social and economic rights, that in these two kind of fundamental right which has organized in the Universal Declaration of the United Nations, and first time it's created two division, and after the division of these two which envisages the right to life, the security, that everything is going to be civil and political whereas economic and social, so that the matter it can be handled very smoothly. So the human right which has discussed so many philosophy, so many philosophical and philosophers and political thinkers from time to time, despite so many opposition is also there from their government, as like they referred to earlier. But in 1948, where all these rights were set in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, sorry, and the United Nations Assembly which adopted them unanimously. So the declaration has been incorporated in the constitution of a number of countries, and our constitution which grant almost all the human rights to the citizen of the country. So the other significant human rights is the right of self-determination. It is the right of all the people to determine their political status and to pursue their economic, social and cultural development. In other word, we can say it is both a political and an economic and social rights of people. So the like the man is born free, so no one has the right to deprive him of the basic necessities such as food, clothing and shelter, and of course nowadays education, medical facility also included. So the government has the authority to violate the integrity of his person, and to curb his right to freedom of thought, of religious or the religion, of assembly, of speech and of movement, both within and outside the country. So the if we go through for the little bit of the origin of human rights, so in the revolution, the French Revolution, like in 1789, play a very important role, because the right was is completely denial in the French, and it's naturally led to the revolution which was begun in 1789. So the period of 1789 is important, and in India, in a special step has been taken to protect human rights and to provide better amenities to it, that the preamble of Indian Constitution, which promises to all the citizen justice, social, economic and political, the all these continue with the fraternity, assuring with the dignity of all. So when the origin of human right is there, so we 1799, 1775, 83, which is for the Great Britain, with 13 American centuries, 13 American colonies were there. So that the period is also one is important. Then the period of 1903, where freedom of whiskey gang is together, but it is not everyone who praise that freedom. So the freedom is slavery is the period of 1903 is also important. Then if we go French Declaration, which of the right of man and the citizen, 1789, 1791. Of course there are different, different country has different year, because like Virginia Declaration of Rights of 1776, Sweden, Spain, Denmark, Germany, Belgium, different country has different year for the accepted of the concept of, or the international concept of the human rights. So thank you so much for all of you for this thing. I will try my best to give little bit idea of, or little bit in more depth study regarding the concept and development of human right. Please drop comments if possible, if you want anything is important one before your examination, and all the best for examination. Thank you so much guys. Have a good day.